Okay, we're going to take a look at the game Hold the Line, and it was designed by Matt Birchfield and Grant and Mike Wiley, and was produced by their company Worthington Games in 2008. And it's a tactical game based on the Battle of the American Revolution. So we're going to take a look at the components, the board, and the rules, just give you an idea of what the game is like. Okay, now right from the start, I can't say enough good things about the components for this game. This is one of Worthington's finest efforts, in my opinion. We'll just take a brief look at the rulebook. Now, it's 24 pages long. It's the new shiny format that's getting kind of in vogue, I guess. You can see it's profusely illustrated, showing you the units, the counters, how to move, examples of play. Now, about half the rule booklet are the rules, and about the second half is the scenarios. So, for example, there's a Battle of Long Island scenario, Harlem Heights, White Plains, Trenton, Brandywine, Venus Heights, Monmouth, another Monmouth one, Kings Mountain, Whitesell's Mills, Hobkirk's Hill, Eutaw Springs, and Princeton. Now, this is a very tactical game, and I emphasize that in every sense of the word. Let's take a look at the counters. Now, the counters are absolutely gorgeous, and the die cutting is just terrific. I wish all games were die cut the same way. Now, you can see half of the counters just literally fall out of the tree. The die cutting is just superb on these, and the counters are very large, very colorful. Okay, we'll take a closer look at them in a moment, but as you can see, as I'm pulling the counters out, they're just falling out of the tree, which is does attest to the die cutting, how good it is. Now we'll try to take a look at the counters closer here. Okay, now I hope we can zoom in a little bit there and get to see if I put an American counter there. You can see the British, LT for light. You can see some of the leader units down there, the victory point marker. You can see they're quite nice counters, and they're large. I haven't measured them, but they must be at least 3/4 of an inch across, maybe an inch. Very nice looking counters. Okay, now I mentioned that the game is tactical. It is very tactical. And here's the board, at least the base board. Now, it is mounted, comes in very good high quality cardboard, and just for the sake of this video, I'm going to put a plastic over it to keep it flat. Okay, we've got a plastic down there, so hope the glare isn't too bad, and that'll keep the board flat. Now, the game comes with a whole mess of terrain tiles. You can see all the river ones there. There's a building. So you make your own map. There's entrenchments and hills. So there's a whole mess of counters. Now I'll just set up, put some terrain down there and show you some movement to get an idea of how the game plays. Okay, there's the game with a few units on the board and some terrain, a loose interpretation of the Princeton scenario. And we'll zoom in and be able to see the counters a little bit closer. Okay, here's a closer look at the units. You can see they're quite nice. They're very detailed. Nice graphics there. There's an American light unit. Nice large units. Very nice looking game. I would say that this is one of Worthington's nicest games from a production point of view. I think it's just a beautiful looking game. There's some of the terrain tiles. You can see some buildings there. And over here, some forest and some stream. And there's a hill. And that's actually a fence line. I spoke there before. I called them entrenchments, but I suppose depending on the scenario, you could use them as entrenchments too. And we'll take a look at some of the other tiles. Okay, I'll just leave those tiles in the box. You can see there's a little bridge counter here. There's a ford counter. And there's like a swamp, I guess. So with these multitudes of tiles, you can make all kinds of scenarios. So it's much like Battlecry in that sense. It's pretty wide open. You can pretty well make your own scenarios. Now, each counter on this scale I'll try to work out what a scale would be so you get an idea. Okay, the game, as I mentioned, is very tactical. So what you're doing is recreating sections of battles. You're not recreating the entire Battle of Bemis Heights on October 7th or the entire Battle of Brandywine on September 11th. So for example, in Bemis Heights, I'm more familiar with this battle, each counter in this scenario would represent about a battalion, one regiment. Okay, same for the Americans and the British. Now, that doesn't mean that on other battles each counter will necessarily represent a battalion. You can do other battles too, where each counter would represent, let's say, a company. So the game is flexible in that sense. You could do regimental type battles, or battles perhaps simulating, maybe a brigade, perhaps a division. So that's where the game shines. It's capable of doing sections of larger battles, and it does it fairly well as a game. And I'll make a few comments on that. Okay, the game system is very simple. It uses an action point termination system to move the units. I'll just clear this out of the way and I'll show you how. You'd use the blue die here, and you'd roll that, and that would tell you how many action points you have, in this case 2. And the player would add the 2 to his base action point value for the scenario. So let's say, for the sake of argument, the British had 3 action points in this example. You can use the action points to either move or fire. Let's give you an example of that. Okay, the rules do have some irritating little nitpicks. For example, in the section on movement, I expect to learn how a unit moves. But in the section on movement, there's no reference as to how far or how many movement points a unit has. It says a unit has generic movement points, and that's what it has. It forgets to tell you what that value is. And I don't see a chart anywhere near those rules. There's a combat hit number chart, but not a movement. So right now I can't tell you exactly how far those units can move, because it's not in the movement section. I know it's something simple. So in the example, in this example, the unit, when it burns up an action point, it can actually move or fire. So obviously when you're too far away, you won't want to be firing, because the chance of hit is not as good. For example, in infantry, firing at 2 hexes at that would need a 6 to get a hit. And if it closes to point blank, it will hit on a 5 or a 6. So the ability to hit is a function of range, which is as it should be. So it is a very simple system. It's just a die roll and rolling a 5 or a 6 ready to get a hit. In some cases a 4, 5, or 6 if it's artillery. Again, a simple system. Okay, close combat. Just checking the close combat rules. It takes 2 action points to close combat. So in our example here, if the British had 3 action points, and this unit wanted to melee with that one, it would have to burn up 2 of those action points to melee the unit. So again, simple but effective. Okay, I found the movement of each unit. It's actually in the game units unit type, which, okay, I can forgive Worthington for that. That's fairly logical, although it would have been nice to sort of see it repeated in the movement section. Anyway, regular movement for regular infantry is 1 hex per turn, so that's fairly straightforward. So in our example there, the British infantry unit here, it could have fired by expending 1 action point, fire at that unit there, or it could have moved adjacent. Kind of an and or thing. You can't move and fire. On the next turn, again to reiterate, if you wanted to have close combat with that, you'd have to spend 2 action points to interact with that enemy unit. Now I should point out what the numbers mean on the counters right now. The numbers represent the morale value of the unit, not its movement point or anything like that. So the higher the number, the better the morale. And the E would represent an elite unit. And an LT on a unit represents the light infantry. Now leaders can aid in movement too. So if you have a leader on the same square as a regiment, and if it expends 1 action point, the infantry unit can move 2 hexes as opposed to 1. So leaders do aid in movement, and they do aid in combat too. Now it's in the optional rules, but the game is so simple I recommend you use them. They allow the leader combat abilities. In this example, the combat ability is 1. So if he expended 1 action point, he can influence the die roll by one pip on the die roll. And the 2 represents how many hits would be required before the leader is removed. So the advanced optional rules are quite simple, and I do recommend using them. Okay, well the game reminded me so much of Worthington's later game, Napoleon's War, that I thought, hey, what would it look like if I put little wee plastic soldiers on here like Napoleon's War? Now I just salvaged these counters from a Risk game, and Risk is back in print, has always been in print. Right now they're the soldiers featured are little Revolutionary War soldiers, so they've got little wee artillery pieces, and I guess you could use different colors if you wanted to represent light infantry, stuff like that. So it's only a thought. It seems almost a shame to go to little plastic figures when you've got these terrific looking counters. But, you know, if you want to get maybe kids or give it an eye candy look, you could always consider using these little soldiers or something instead of the pieces that come with the game. Like I said, it is a simple game, and I think if you're looking for, you know, a tactical game on 18th century warfare or a tactical game on the American Revolution, this isn't going to quite fit the bill if you're into history like I am. It is primarily a game. It's a fun game. It's lots of fun. It's easy to set up. It's got a Revolutionary War flavor to it, but it's not a detailed study of Revolutionary War tactics. Okay, well, that's it for Hold the Line. In summary, I think it's a good little game, good introductory game. If you want something more for 18th century tactical studies, you'd want to probably add some rules yourself, or maybe get a different game. This isn't quite the one for showing you real historical tactics of the period. They do have an expansion for it too, which covers the French and Indian War. I don't have that one yet, but overall, I have to give this game, you know, a pretty nice rating. Certainly the components are almost the best I've ever seen. They're very, very good. So kudos to Worthington for producing this nice little game. And depending on your expectations, you're going to be either, you know, disappointed or quite happy. If you're expecting a detailed simulation of 18th century warfare, this doesn't quite cover the bill. But if you want a nice light game that's easy to play, easy to set up, and has an 18th century feel, I think Hold the Line might fill the bill. So that's it. Thank you for watching.